Welcome back, and today we're going to be diving deep into the new 2026 Netflix sci-fi thriller, The Last House. Before we go any further, please consider this your strict and official spoiler warning because we're going to talk about everything, ending included, so proceed at your own risk. Now, the stakes around this movie are incredibly high because on paper, at least, this movie probably should have been a masterpiece. You have heavyweight, critically acclaimed actors like Wagner, Moura, and Greta leading a massive sci-fi apocalypse project. But once you hit play, it becomes wildly apparent that this movie is a massive tonal mess that cannot decide what genre it even wants to be. So let's go ahead and strip away all the fluff and break down whether or not this high-concept nightmare actually survives the flood or just sinks to the bottom. The vibe for this movie is pure claustrophobic lockdown. It leans heavily into a domestic pandemic allegory that is wrapped inside of a creature feature. But the pacing is a slow burn, and that's fine. But the problem is it occasionally forgets that it's supposed to be burning at all. At 1 hour and 52 minutes, the runtime for this is painfully bloated. They could have easily shaved off 20, 30 minutes from this movie and lost absolutely nothing of value. Instead of building this relentless tension, the execution just drags. And then there's this massive 5-year time jump. Once the initial shock of the rain and the invisible barrier wears off, the movie aggressively fast forwards through 5 years of isolation. While skipping the middle year does spare us a painful 1,800 days of watching the Delgados rationing vegetables, doing PE exercises, and playing games, and just having overall dry conversation, it feels incredibly jarring at times. We are violently thrown from the claustrophobic dread of the immediate crisis directly into the stale domestic drama where the family has just accepted their fate. In my opinion, it disrupts whatever tension was building, and now it forces the audience to catch up with these characters who now feel disconnected from the people that we actually met in the first act of this film. When you cast Wagner, Moura, and Greta, you're essentially using a cheat code for acting greatness, but the script, in my opinion, completely fails them. The narrative jumps wildly back and forth between a tender, coming-of-age family drama and a bargain bin Lovecraftian horror. I personally think it leaves the actors scrambling to figure out which genre are they actually supposed to be acting in. The dialogue is another thing. It is remarkably rigid. I think it lacks the natural fluidity of a family that has been trapped inside this home for the last 5 years, isolated from the entire world. And honestly, at times, they barely feel like a real family. From the things that I have seen Greta in, she is usually a remarkable actress. But in this, because of the script is so clunky, this might actually be considered one of her worst performances. And then all of that heavy-handed environmental messaging, it was a bit much at times, but I understand what they were trying to do and what they were trying to say. But it became a lot at times. Which brings me to one of the worst characters in the entire movie, Susan, the neighbor, who looks out of the window and sees this coyote running around wild and just says, "It's your world now." You guys tell me, who talks like that outside of a daytime soap opera? It was lines like this in the film that were painful to watch at times, and they kind of take your attention away from the movie itself. But I need to know right now, you guys drop down in the comments and tell me, am I just nitpicking, or am I actually right about those lines in the film that were just seemed like a Hallmark apocalypse movie rather than an actual apocalypse movie, or how people would react or say things in this type of situation? Drop down in the comments and let me know, please. So how does this aquatic fever dream actually end? Well, when we finally reach the climax, the big twist is the antagonists aren't actually aliens from some distant or another galaxy. They are actually ancient deep sea ocean beings who have risen to the surface to reclaim this heavily polluted earth. We could call this Mother Nature's ultimate eviction notice to all of the humans. Now, the survival mechanics leading up to this are actually pretty creative. For example, like Jason's desperate chimney fishing. And that's when he builds the rig to catch animals outside and pull them back inside the house through a chimney. It was actually pretty creative, like I said. And in those scenes, we actually get to see what an actual engineer may be able to come up with. So I thought it was very on par for how an engineer may think or create something to help his family survive in a situation where they've basically exhausted all of their supplies and food. But then we get to that finale that morphs into a flooded Home Alone-style trap house. We see a creature who breaches the living room floor, and these creatures have been alluded to throughout the entire film in different stories and books and drawings that have been written or read throughout the film by the family. But this creature floods the house with salt water and partially to destroy all of the crops that they have built this entire time, and basically to force them to die how everybody else died, from starvation and isolation and no resources. But this family is not going to go down without a damn fight. They actually managed to string up one of their Home Alone traps and actually harpoon this sea creature. But then when they finally get this sea creature trapped, Jason stands there with a knife in his hand, ready to execute this ancient squid god, when his wife Ruth says, "Hold on, babe, let it live." And she's been operating on a different frequency this entire movie, but she begs him to show mercy. And with some hesitancy, and I understand where he was coming from with that, he decides to back off, cut the creature loose, throw the knife in the water, and show some mercy and some humanity, even though there's not much of it left. But in return, the beast opens the door. The family runs out, and we see all these other beast friends come along. And the beast signals to them, stand down. These are good people. They let me go. And all of this happens right before the family's house sinks into the hole in the ground, which they've been alluding to that was going to happen the entire movie as well. The house has been sinking. So no surprise there that it finally sunk at the end of the movie. But the environmental payoff here does land because it forces humanity to let go of its strict, toxic entitlement. It proves that true survival actually relies on coexistence and compassion rather than conquering and killing. Now, here's my hot take. The claustrophobic single location set design of this movie was pure genius. I can't complain about it. It was actually nice. But that climate change monster twist was lazier than the movie The Happening by M. Night Shyamalan, if you guys have seen that. This movie reminded me a lot of The Happening. The core message is powerful, but it completely buckles under its own weight, especially in the final moments of the movie. The ending is incredibly lackluster, showing the family setting off on their dead neighbor's boat that they eventually name after their dead dog. We see them broadcast a radio call to any survivors that may be out there as they're off looking for a new home, just to get this spooky, sort of distorted hello right before the credits roll. To me, it felt cheap. I thought the movie desperately needed to lean into a much darker tone instead of trying to force this heavy-handed moral lesson. It is a decent weekend watch with some good visual tension, but don't go into this thing expecting a masterpiece. So for my score on this film, I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5 or a 5 out of 10, which in my opinion, I think is pretty fair. Now I have a final debate question based off this movie's concept. Realistically, how long do you guys think that you will actually survive in this scenario, locked in your house with your family before you actually lost your mind? Would you make it 5 years, or would you be trying to take chances with the water monsters by week 2? But go ahead and sound off in the comments for me and let me know what you guys would do in that scenario. And with all of that being said, I want to say I appreciate you all for coming. I hope that you keep coming by and checking out more of these episodes. If you would like to, and I would appreciate it, please hit that like and subscribe button. And until next time, stay safe and keep watching.